Hunger of the Gods rocks. John Gwynne rocks. Full stop. Hunger of the Gods is the second book in the Bloodsworn Trilogy. And one of my favorite things about the Hunger of the Gods is that John Gwynne dodges the oft-begotten fate of books that are the second in a trilogy. And that fate is mediocrity. The second book in a trilogy is a tricky one to pull off because you're not often able to wrap up any of the plot points. Book B is often a bridge from Book A to Book C. Things are rarely resolved, often new plot points are revealed, and we usually end up with more questions than we get answers for. And sometimes that can be very unsatisfying. But that is not the case here. Well, I mean, a lot of what I just said does happen in The Hunger of the Gods, but what is not the case is the part about it being unsatisfying. Now, I'm going to touch very briefly on some of the stuff that happens in this book. I'm going to try to not spoil anything, but I'm a bit of a wild card. So if you don't want to risk it for the biscuit, Hunger of the Gods carries on the three major plot points from the Shadow of the Gods. Orka is still hell-bent on her quest to rescue her son Brekka. Varg is now firmly entrenched in the Bloodsworn, but his major goal is still to avenge his sister. And Elvar is a little more fluid. She's the daughter of a Jarl who has rejected her life of privilege, and all the unwanted marriages and pregnancies that come with it, and has instead chosen to live a life by the sword and earn her battle fame. But now we are also given two new POVs. Guthvar, the nephew of Jarl Sigrun, who was a bit of a shitheel in the Shadow of the Gods and is a shitheel here, but he has some unfortunate but humorous events befall him. He becomes pretty humorously entwined in the Líkrifa plot. And we also get some chapters from Bjor, after he betrays the Battlegrim in Shadow of the Gods and rejoins the Raven Feeders. Now, if you look at the cover of the Shadow of the Gods, you can pretty firmly tell what the intention of this book is. Big dragon on the cover, book trying to make big dragon stuff happen. And this cover has a big wolf on it. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Like I mentioned, this book rocks. My favorite thing about this series so far is that it is so well paced. There are no lulls in the story that I can recall, and even the slower parts are very meaningful to character development, even if they aren't propelling us forward as far as like the plot momentum. And those slower moments are interspersed between a lot of big action moments. When this book peaks, it peaks hard. Lots of action, lots of drama, lots of big emotions. But when it slows down, it still trots along at a steady but not meandering pace. The action is very whipping. John Gwynne writes a hell of a fight scene. And this series is chock full of fight scenes. Fight scenes on sale. Fight scenes by the dozen. And they are very fun. There is a matter-of-factness about the violence in this series that sometimes I found myself becoming a little bit numb to, but I think that's just representative of the Norse culture that heavily inspires these books. Violence was a frequent, matter-of-fact thing, and sometimes I think that works against the emotive potential of the story. Often in fantasy, we have stories that are leading up to the big violence, and this book has a lot of big violence. So when it does come around, which is frequent, it's not as impactful as I guess I would like it to be. I think John Gwynne's character work is great. Orka is admirable in her stoic determination. She's also my favorite. Varg is very fun to watch as he grows and discovers who he is. Also maybe kind of fallen in love a little bit. Elvar's story is also fascinating as she assumes some responsibilities and becomes entangled with some very powerful forces. Guthvar's story is fun because he's just a weasel. When he dies, it will be very satisfying, but for now, it's fun to just watch him be a weasel. So far, Bjor is the least satisfying for me, but I think that will come to fruition in Fury of the Gods. I don't think this is his place to shine. I think we're just kind of laying some foundation. My biggest issue with the Bloodsworn Trilogy is that this series is very, very good. But so far, nothing is really taking my breath away, leaving me slack-jawed or gobsmacked. The heights are pretty good, but if I compare it to some of the other fantasy that I have read and adored, the pacing is often better in Bloodsworn. These books are endlessly readable, but I haven't seen stars from John Gwynne yet. I want that moment where I have to put the book down because I just cannot read another word. I am very confident that the Fury of the Gods will change that, but overall, I love the Bloodsworn Trilogy. I recommend it a lot. And if you like your fantasy with a heavy Norse bent and a lot of sword and sorcery, this is the place for you. 4 out of 5 hammers.